Know that I come from Oklahoma originally, though I've lived here the vast majority of my life. And I stay pretty aware of what's going on in that home state of mine, where I still have a brother, a sister-in-law, and another brother-in-law. And I pay attention somewhat to what goes on in the Methodist church there, because I went to Southern Methodist University and my theological education was in a Methodist seminary. And I was struck by an article that appeared in what is called the Oklahoma Conference of the United Methodist Church on June 16th. The Methodist Church, who often disappoints me with their stances, especially their recent division based on half of the church believing that they ought to recant their statement on acceptance of homosexuality, a troubling issue for the Methodist Church that has caused a major split for them. Nevertheless, had a statement on Christian nationalism. And I just wanted to read the first paragraph of that to you. It states, "In recent years, a troubling ideology known as Christian nationalism has gained acceptance in American public life. As people of faith, we are called to understand what this movement represents and to carefully consider how it distorts both our democratic values and the teachings of Jesus Christ. Christian nationalism is a political ideology that fuses Christian and national identities, aiming for the United States to be governed as an explicitly Christian nation. Advocates argue America was founded as Christian and must be reclaimed for God, a view that distorts both history and the gospel. This ideology promotes only Christians are truly American, marginalizing others, fostering division, and undermining shared civic identity, thus eroding religious freedom." Now that's a pretty strong statement coming out of a very red state by a church that's had its own great struggles trying to remain inclusive, accepting, and non-judgmental. And I applaud the Oklahoma Conference of the Methodist Church for having the courage to make that statement. This issue of Christian nationalism has been one that has personally disturbed me greatly. And I entitled today's message, "The Unfaithfulness of Christian Nationalism." Now, I heard in my own entitling of the message a kind of judgmental stance that's not very familiar to me. And I really struggled with what word do I want to use, and another word kept coming up, and I said, maybe this message ought to be called "The Confusion of American Nationalism," which I think, frankly, is a much better term to use. So I think right here on the spot, I'm going to retitle my sermon so that before it goes on to YouTube, it is entitled "The Confusion of American Nationalism." Go ahead, Bill. The reason I happened upon the terminology, the confusion, is because, frankly, among other things, I'm pretty confused by it. I just don't understand it in terms of what it's trying to say if it wants to claim any kind of stance that is aligned with the Christian faith. Nor, frankly, do I think it is aligned with the essence of American democracy. So I can't find what its alignment is. I can't align it with Christian faith, and I can't align it with the very tenets that founded American democracy, and yet it's claiming to be a Christian nationalism. Now, for all my theological background and all the studies that I've done, my approach to this is really pretty simple in terms of faith stance. And there are some terms that we need to define before I go any further. One of the terms is belief. And I shall just share with you that belief is intellectual assent to certain propositions. That's what belief is. And that's why in the established traditional churches, they have the creeds. And the word creed comes from the Latin credo, which means I believe. And you see congregations stand up, and every member of the congregation says that they all believe the same thing. I believe in God the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, and they go on. And everyone's saying exactly the same words and saying that they all believe the same thing. I don't really believe that they believe the same thing, but they're saying it. And it's part of the tradition. But belief is, I'm going to give intellectual assent to this. Belief is not faith. Belief is intellectual assent to certain propositions. And theological discussion and theological discourse has been grounded in dialogues concerning to what theological propositions do we give assent. That's what the councils of the church have all been about. You know, is Jesus fully divine? Is Jesus fully human? Is Jesus both fully divine and fully human? And how in the world does that make any sense in a rational way? And that's the kind of dialogue that goes on, because what do you want to believe? Someone may say, I believe in the essential evilness of humanity. Another may say, I believe in the essential goodness of humanity. We were, after all, created in the image of God, and he said it was very, very good. Those are beliefs. I mean, how do you adjudicate that? Faith, on the other hand, is an attitudinal approach to life. That is seen in our actions, not in our spoken beliefs. That is seen in the way we treat others. That is the way we live our lives. Now, you can see the faith of a person if that person has no religious association. A person of integrity. A person of authenticity. A person who's able to be themselves openly, honestly, authentically, without fear or facade or hesitation, has a certain faith stance toward life, a way of being, if you will. You know, the famous psychologist Carl Rogers wrote on becoming a person. That's his classic work about psychology and about the psychology of the human being. But then he wrote a second work that doesn't get as much reading, and that is A Way of Being. Because what he was saying is, for psychological health, your attitudinal approach to life determines your healthiness. So if you're one way one time and another way another time, that inconsistency undermines your way of being. And way of being gives rise to a trust. And one of the words for trust is fides, which means faith. You know? So belief and faith are to be distinguished. And I want that to, so when I use a word like unfaithful, then I'm talking about a way of being, not certain theological or political doctrines and dogmas. The other term that needs to be defined is nationalism as opposed to patriotism. Nationalism is a self-serving way of affirming that my nation is better than all the others. My nation matters more than any other nation. My nation has special standing among the world of nations. Nationalism says there's nothing more important than my nation. Something like that can identify a Hitler who can come to power and say, let's make Germany great again, which was his slogan for the 1933 presidential campaign, make Germany great again. And he wanted to say that our nationalism is our faith, that our nationalism is to say that Germany is the greatest nation, that we are the Aryan race, that we are the ones that are better than anyone else, and that superiority of way of being allows us to take on other countries without regard to their borders or without regard to their independence. And so we can invade Poland, and we can take over Czechoslovakia, and we can declare war on Europe, and we can reestablish in our nationalistic spirit the superiority of Germany over all else. Patriotism is a commitment to serving the well-being of your nation. Patriotism means that as an American, I am committed to the well-being of my fellow Americans, and that all of my considerations pass through this filter of questioning, is this enhancing the well-being of my fellow Americans, or is this diminishing the well-being of some of my fellow Americans? Is this accepting or is this rejecting? Is this life-enhancing for my fellow countrymen, or is this diminishing? That's patriotism. That I always seek the greater good in the true and very clear understanding that while I love my nations, other people love their nations. And while my nation has wonderful things that are its attributes, other people's nations have other things that are their attributes. You know, when we sing our songs about America, from sea to shining sea. Other nations have shining seas. It's blue skies. Other nations have blue skies. The wonderful forests. Other nations have wonderful forests. And we break out of our provincialism and say, yes, my patriotism is to where I am. I will support that without any illusion that what I am supporting for the well-being of others, other people of goodwill are supporting in their national confines as well. The difference between nationalism and patriotism. I just need to get those terms defined before we go any further. And then we come to this term Christian nationalism. Well, heavens knows that there's no clear definition of what it means to be Christian. There's not even a church that says we're the only Christian church there is. The history of the church is one of division and reformation and conflict and councils and trying to define who are we really and what is it we're really trying to say, and how does the theology of a first century world fit into the reality of a 21st century world, and that the faith, the Christian faith, is something that's ever growing and ever changing and ever accommodating itself to the situation. And so we always look for the essence of the faith. The unchanging and the changeless. And the unchanging has always been the life and ministry of Jesus of Nazareth. That what we see in the life and ministry of Jesus of Nazareth becomes the paradigm for who we want to be and who we tell ourselves we ought to be as human beings. And that's why he is called Lord. Lord, he sets the standard. And it's against that standard, against that witness, that we judge ourselves. And so, as some of my friends used to say in the 50s, well, the question to ask is, what would Jesus do? Remember that? What would Jesus do? Sounds so naive, and yet it's so profound. It takes courage to ask that question. Now, but at the essence of it, that's what we're all about. What we are claiming as we have seen in the life and ministry of Jesus of Nazareth, what human life in its actualized state ought to be. And what is that? What we have seen in the life of Jesus of Nazareth is that life is lived most fully and most meaningfully in relationships of love. Now, Jesus didn't teach anything new that was not already known in his time. Jesus was a rabbi, a Jewish rabbi whose real genius was taking all of the huge number of rules and laws of Judaism and say, what is the essence of the message? And when he was challenged to answer that question, he said, it's to love God and to love your neighbor, and incidentally, while you're at it, love your enemy as well. It's all about love. And then as the early church took that message, they said, and we need to add a footnote, that he who says he loves God and not his neighbor is a liar, because how can you love God whom you have not seen when you do not love the neighbor in front of you? It's a powerful message. So what it really says is, the way to love God is to love your neighbor. Faith without works is dead. And that's the essence of it. That's the message. And so when the church comes together, what we're really asking ourselves is, are we living out our lives with a way of being, faith, regardless of our differences of beliefs? Are we living out together a way of being that is faithful? And the criterion that we use to judge that is, are we loving our neighbor? And who is our neighbor? Anyone in need. It's not just you guys that I like and we get along with and we're easy to be with. The neighbor is anyone in need. And Jesus explains it. Hey, imagine that I came along and you didn't know it was I. And I was hungry. Did you feed me? I was naked. Did you clothe me? I was ill. Did you visit me? Did you minister to me? I was in prison. Did you come and be with me? When you did it to the least of these, you did it to me. And when you didn't do it to the least of these, you didn't do it to me, which means you were not faithful. If faithful means my way of being is modeled after the life and ministry of Jesus. So let's go back to Christian nationalism. This is why I'm confused. Now here we are in a country that says, give me your tired, give me your poor, give me your weary, give me your huddled masses yearning to be free. Here we are in a country that says that all people are endowed by their Creator equally. There we are in a country that affirms as its foundational message that all persons have value and have certain unalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Sounds good. We have the Statue of Liberty welcoming people, welcoming the stranger, welcoming the immigrant. We've claimed to be the melting pot of the world, and that our diversity makes us strong. Now that is the essence of the national message for the United States. It always has been. And in the 1950s, because we were all shook up about the communist scare, we even added a few things. In the Pledge to Allegiance, we added under God, one nation under God. That wasn't there until the 1950s. But because of the big communist scare, we said, well, we better get on the right side here, and so we'll be one nation under God, just to show that we're not communists, because they're atheists, and we don't like atheists because we're not accepting of anyone different from us. And when you really get down to the important stuff, we're going to put it on our money. In God we trust. So in 1956, now, see, I'm so much older than some of you. In 1956, I'm already 13 years old. I kind of know what's going on at this point. We put it on our money. Now, when you put it on your money, talk about, you show me the money, there it is. That's what we're claiming to be as a nation. That everything about us, from our allegiance to our money, has God on it. We're on our way to being a godly nation. And then come along the people who say we want to be Christian nationalists. I took some notes on this. The primary allegiance of Christian nationalism is to the nation, with the belief that the nation has a divinely ordained status. That's been part of our history. Manifest destiny. Yeah. We have the power, might makes right. And so the Native Americans, the ones who were here before us, aren't as powerful as we are, so we just take their land away and claim it for our own. Go back to my days in Oklahoma. I lived among the Chickasaw and the Choctaw, the Cherokee, the Seminole, and the Creek. I lived in Creek County, Oklahoma, after the Creek Nation. What the Native American couldn't understand is why the white man thought he owned the land. They really couldn't understand that. The Great Spirit had given us the blessings of nature. The Great Spirit had given us all of this to be shared with one another. That song, Oklahoma, from the musical, Roger Thompson got it, where it says, we know we belong to the land, and the land we belong to is grand. That's Native American talk. Hear the words. We know we belong to the land. The land doesn't belong to us. Well, when might makes right, you can take what you want. And the rights of others don't matter that much. And how do you justify it? Well, it's manifest destiny, of course. God intended this for us. If I want it, God intended it. If I take it, God gave it. The love of power versus the power of love. So with nationalism, the primary allegiance is to the nation, with the belief that the nation is divinely ordained with its status. Their stance on power is that in Christian nationalism, seek to gain and leverage political power to enforce the ideology and privilege of those who are your co-adherents. In Christian nationalism, their scope of concern is exclusive and focused on the national in-group, often leading to suspicion or marginalization of outsiders. We need to build those walls because the others may come in. With Christian nationalism, our engagement with the world attempts to impose a specific cultural and political vision through legislation and national policy. With Christian nationalism, their use of force can be seen in the way it is associated with militarism and justifies using force to assert national and cultural dominance. We need the National Guard in all the major cities that have black mayors and major black populations. Now, the teachings of Jesus, as I understand them, say that we now have this ministry of reconciliation, God's love making its appeal through us. That we accept the other. That in Christ there's neither male nor female, Greek nor Jew, slave nor free, gay nor straight. So that all the phobias are no longer appropriate. All the fears that drive us to a nationalistic, so-called Christian stance are both unfaithful and unnecessary. If we could just see one another as persons, see one another as precious persons. To quote the Quakers, if we could just remember that we are created, all of us, every human being is created in the image of God, and we can see that of God in one another. So that we're no longer afraid. We're no longer saying, oh my God, the white race may become a minority sometime in the United States. We have to stop that now. Because obviously God is a white man on a throne. If you don't believe that, go to the Sistine Chapel. You know, God's a white man. Pretty muscular at that, incidentally. What kind of distortion of the teachings of Jesus is that? Jesus, who never asked, okay, what's your religious orientation? You're blind, let me help you see what you've never seen before. You're poor, let me feed you with fishes and loaves. You're suffering, let me go to you, even if you're the child of a Roman soldier. You're faithful, and I celebrate you. You're a tax collector, and I'll have dinner with you. You're caught in adultery, and I'll forgive you and challenge anyone who wants to judge you based on their own lifestyle. Where is there in the story of Jesus any kind of exclusion of someone in need, any kind of exclusion of the other, any kind of non-response to those who turn to him? If that's our model, then that's what we're called to be as the church. This is why the church is called the body of Christ. We are the incarnation, or claim to be, of the life and ministry of Christ that we have taken into ourselves. We now have this ministry of reconciliation. God's love making its appeal through us. It's what we've seen in the Christ. It's what we're called to be. Christian nationalism, I'm confused. I don't see how it's faithful to the essence of the Christian message. I don't see how it's faithful to the essence of America's founding principles. I don't understand it. But I know this much. We need to speak out against that kind of ignorance. Ignorant of the Christian principles, ignorant of the founding principles of a nation. After all, what was it Christ forgave the crowd from the cross? Their ignorance. They don't know what they're doing. May God help them. Amen.